My name's Travis. I'm a retired forestry officer, now living out my golden years in a quiet, pine-draped corner of northern Georgia. Or at least it was quiet, until the HOA decided my trees were a visual nuisance. When my wife Ellie and I first bought our dream property 15 years ago, it was a breath of fresh air, literally. The towering oaks, the shady pines, the dense clusters of maple and dogwood. It felt like owning a private piece of nature, a buffer from the buzzing chaos of city life. The house was set back on 2 acres, bordered by forest. No traffic, no neighbors right up against your window, just the sound of birds and the occasional deer in the yard. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and it was peaceful. I knew there was an HOA when we bought into the community, but the documents had a grandfather clause. The previous owner had planted most of the trees on what used to be an open lot, and they were all legal, predating the HOA's more restrictive landscaping policies. I read the fine print twice. My lawyer read it too. The HOA couldn't touch them. But HOAs don't read documents. They read opportunities, and they hate people who don't fall in line. The trouble began in spring. I got a notice in the mail from the Whispering Pines HOA, a hilariously ironic name, stating that my trees were obstructing neighborhood uniformity. That was their first mistake, thinking I'd care about some ambiguous nonsense like that. But I responded politely, pointing out the clause in the community charter and citing the original agreement that protected the trees. They didn't like that. Not one bit. The next month, I received another letter, this one more aggressive. It claimed my pines were at risk of falling, that they were a liability to neighboring homes, and that they were interfering with future development zoning. I lived on a cul-de-sac. There wasn't any development happening behind me, unless squirrels had started laying blueprints. It became clear they were trying to force me to remove the trees. They didn't care about safety. They wanted conformity. Still, I played nice. I sent an arborist's report proving the trees were healthy, stable, and in no danger. I even invited the HOA president, a balding ex-corporate type named Gerald Flanders, over to see the property himself. He declined. Then came the fines. It started at $50 per day. Every single day I refused to cut the trees, the number ticked upward. I laughed at first. They couldn't enforce it. The trees were protected. But then they placed a lien on my home. That's when I knew they weren't bluffing. I lawyered up fast. My attorney, a younger guy named Brent, who looked like he drank Red Bull for breakfast, was furious when he read the documents. "This is a shakedown," he said. "They're using bullying tactics, and they think you're too old or too tired to fight back." He was right about one thing. I was tired, but not tired of fighting. Tired of these tin pot tyrants thinking they could run roughshod over people. It only got worse from there. Gerald and his goons started showing up unannounced. They'd walk the edge of my property with clipboards, taking photos of the tree line, pretending to measure things. One of them even stepped onto my lawn and started tagging a tree with orange spray paint. That was enough to send them running. But they came back 2 days later with the sheriff. Claimed I'd threatened them. Fortunately, I had security footage, and the sheriff was an old buddy from my forestry days. He laughed, told Gerald to quit wasting police time, and left. That little stunt was the tipping point. I decided I wasn't just going to fight the HOA. I was going to break them. The first thing I did was dig into the HOA's own charter, and what I found was shocking. Gerald had amended the community rules illegally, without the necessary 75% vote from homeowners. He'd falsified signatures on several ballots, bullied retirees into signing under pressure, and had even passed emergency bylaws without quorum. That was a direct violation of Georgia state law. I handed it all to Brent, and he nearly did a backflip. "This is enough to invalidate their charter," he said. "We can take this to the county board and the court." But I wanted more than a legal win. I wanted the clubhouse. See, the HOA had recently built a massive new community center, 2 stories with a gym, pool, and event room. It was their crown jewel, funded by a mandatory increase in everyone's HOA dues. The land it sat on had been donated by a developer, but the HOA had never finalized the deed transfer. Legally, it was still part of the original forest reserve owned by the now-defunct development company. Guess who bought the company's assets at a foreclosure sale 5 years ago? Me. Yup. That land was mine. Brent couldn't believe it. "You're telling me you own the plot the HOA clubhouse sits on?" "Every square inch," I said. "And I've got the title to prove it." We drafted the eviction notice immediately. Certified mail, signed and stamped, delivered in person by a uniformed courier. The board had 30 days to vacate the premises or face trespassing charges. They thought I was bluffing until the bulldozers rolled in. But we're not quite there yet. Over the next few weeks, I became public enemy number 1. The HOA sent threatening letters, tried to file restraining orders, even attempted to hold an emergency vote to seize the land through eminent domain, which of course they had no authority to do. Meanwhile, I went public. I contacted every local news outlet, published an expose online, and even got a spot on a regional radio talk show. The story exploded. "Retired veteran faces HOA tyranny over trees" was the headline. People were furious. I was flooded with messages of support from other homeowners dealing with similar abuse. One guy in Florida sent me drone footage of his HOA sneaking onto his lawn at night to measure grass height. It was wild. And suddenly, Gerald wasn't so confident anymore. The board started fracturing. 2 members resigned. Another publicly apologized. But Gerald doubled down. He filed a lawsuit against me for property endangerment and community defamation. Brent responded with a motion to dismiss, citing not only the false signature scandal but Gerald's shady history, embezzling funds from a previous HOA in Tampa, which he'd settled quietly out of court. That was enough for a judge to freeze the HOA's assets pending investigation. No more fines, no more dues, no more. The morning of demolition day was unusually quiet. No leaf blowers whining in the background. No suburban joggers on the sidewalks pretending not to stare. No Gerald, flanked by clipboard-wielding board members, muttering under his breath about code violations. Just me, my lawyer Brent, a certified land surveyor, a sheriff's deputy to keep the peace, and 2 bright yellow bulldozers idling at the edge of the HOA clubhouse parking lot. I hadn't taken this decision lightly. I'd sent 3 separate legal notices to the board over the past 30 days. I had warned them in writing that the clubhouse was on land I legally owned, that I had revoked their right to use it, that any continued occupancy was trespassing, that, per Georgia statute, I had every right to reclaim my private property, up to and including removing unauthorized structures. They ignored all of it. I wasn't just dealing with petty tyrants anymore. I was dealing with a bunch of arrogant fools who thought the law didn't apply to them. So I called in the big guns. A full demolition crew, licensed, insured, and accompanied by legal observers and a drone operator who filmed everything for documentation and YouTube. Because yes, by now this whole thing had gone viral. My story had reached over 3.5 million views online. People all over the country were calling me a hero, a patriot, even a one-man HOA reckoning. It was surreal. At exactly 9 a.m., I gave the signal. The first bulldozer lowered its blade and pressed forward, right through the main entrance of the clubhouse. Glass shattered, wood splintered, and with one glorious metallic roar, the front lobby caved in. I stood there on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching justice in real time. Gerald showed up 10 minutes later. Red-faced and stumbling out of a black Lexus, he marched up to the sheriff's deputy and demanded that I be arrested. He waved a paper in the air, some court injunction that hadn't even been signed. The deputy glanced at it, then looked back at Gerald like he was a child who'd drawn on the wall with crayons. "This land is private property," the deputy said, "and the structure is being removed legally. You're trespassing." Gerald didn't get it. He kept shouting until the deputy escorted him to the curb. Not arrested, just embarrassed. But the look on his face when the second bulldozer took down the gym wing, that was priceless. By noon, the entire structure was rubble. I let the crew finish cleanup, removed the debris, flattened the lot, and reseeded the ground with native grasses. No more monstrosity of stucco and fake stone. Just a clean, open space surrounded by tall, proud trees. The clubhouse was gone. And so it seemed was Gerald's power. But I wasn't done. While the HOA was in legal disarray, I filed a civil lawsuit, class action style, on behalf of myself and 12 other homeowners who had been wrongfully fined, harassed, or intimidated by the board over the past 5 years. Brent compiled everything: photos, video, testimonies, letters. It was airtight. Turns out Gerald had been skimming funds from HOA dues for years. Fake landscaping expenses, ghost contractors, unnecessary repairs charged at triple the market rate. The money trail led directly to a shell company owned by his cousin. The lawsuit revealed it all. The court froze what remained of the HOA's bank accounts and ordered a full forensic audit. Gerald resigned before the investigation was complete, but it didn't save him. He was charged with wire fraud, misappropriation of funds, and filing false financial disclosures. He ended up serving 2 years in federal prison. The rest of the HOA board dissolved. Brent petitioned the county to formally disband the Whispering Pines HOA entirely, citing breach of charter and widespread homeowner dissent. The vote passed, unanimously. No more HOA. Let me say that again for the folks in the back. No more HOA. The sense of freedom in the neighborhood was instant. People tore down the ugly uniform mailboxes and installed their own. One neighbor painted their house bright teal just because they could. Kids started chalking the sidewalks again. Lawns got a little longer. Life felt normal. As for me, I planted even more trees. Filled that bulldozed lot with native species. Longleaf pine, red oak, tulip poplar. Built a small wooden gazebo at the edge and made it a community space. No paperwork. No fees, just a sign that read, "All are welcome." The local paper ran a front-page story with the headline, "Man Bulldozes Clubhouse, Rebuilds Community." I still have that framed in my garage. But my favorite moment? 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail. No, not from another HOA. From a young couple who'd just moved in down the road. They'd bought a home in Whispering Pines because they'd seen my story online. They wrote, "We chose this place because of you. Thank you for standing up for homeowners like us. We know now that we won't be bullied." That was it. That's all I needed. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet crunch of leaves under your boots as you walk through the forest you saved. And sometimes it's the glorious rumble of a bulldozer as you reclaim what's rightfully yours.